We are very pleased indeed to be joined today by one of the shipping industry's most prominent voices, Martin Stopford. Martin is an economist with more than 50 years' experience in the shipping industry, having held senior roles at British Shipbuilders, Chase Manhattan Bank and Clarksons, where he was a member of the main board. As an academic, he established and still leads the Anatomy of Ship Finance course at the Cambridge Academy of Transport and is author of the award-winning textbook, Maritime Economics, now in its third edition. Martin, a very warm welcome indeed to you.
Giles, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Martin, 50 years in the industry. Obviously, there have been significant changes over that time in your career. What stands out most for you as the most significant difference today in the industry to 1971, and what, if anything, remains the same?
Well, I guess it's interesting. I came here via Monument Tube Station, and which has not changed since 1971. But in those days, if you spent 10 minutes walking around the city, there was shipping offices everywhere. P&O had their enormous dedicated office in Leadenhall Street, just on the corner with Mary Axe. And it was a shipping centre which was vibrant in that sense. But I think really since then, the big change in 1971, which we didn't really understand at the time, was that was the beginning of the end of the first phase of globalization.
Right.
It was a complete change of key. What had happened was simple enough. I mean, we've heard a lot recently about Bretton Woods and the growth of globalization, which was very much an American product. And the big multinational companies were anxious to get out and to get cheap transport so they could develop their raw materials and move their products around the place. And the shipping industry was an integral part of that. They wanted bigger ships, and the cargo owners gave ship owners charters. The ship owners took the charters to the banks, who used the emerging euro-dollar market to finance them. And the whole thing grew like blazes until the early 1970s, when I think it really was out of control. And at that time, in 1973, the shipping industry was out of control because it was ordering ships on an outrageous scale. I mean, I think the tanker fleet at the beginning of 1973 was 190 million tons, and by October they'd ordered 120 million tons more.
Wow.
Amazing. And then, of course, the providers of the oil wanted more than $2 a barrel, and suddenly the oil price went through the roof. We got hyperinflation. We got really a total about turn. And for the next 20 years, shipping moved away from the multinationals towards the marketplace, and ship owners were in a situation where they had to run the ships as cheaply as they possibly could. Today, 2020s, I would say, to use Winston Churchill's phrase again, we're at the beginning of the end of globalization. That's where we are today, I think. And I dare say we'll explore this a little bit more later.
Thank you very much, Martin. So the International Maritime Organization recently approved net zero regulations for global shipping, continuing the shipping industry's focus on emissions. What do you see as the main challenges for shipping in significantly reducing its emissions? And do you think that the industry will ever achieve net zero?
That sounds a little bit like a loaded question. I think that perhaps my initial answer to that is perhaps not what you might expect. Thinking about this before, I reckon the biggest challenge is that this is something quite new for the shipping industry, because the new era, the tail end of globalization, is being driven by regulation, not by markets. And this is a very different situation. And it's particularly different because previously the regulators, especially IMO, have been very prescriptive in and the class societies as well, have been very prescriptive in how you build the ships. For example, when we had double hull tankers in the 1990s, there was 4 or 5 committees came up with the precise specification of a double hull tanker. And so there was only one thing you could do, and the decisions were easy. Today, IMO's energy has gone into a decision about whether we could do 2050 net zero or not. And there really hasn't been the resources or perhaps the incentive to say how you do it. And the truth is that the technology is not really there to do it. So the shipping industry is launching into this new era with a totally blank sheet of paper with 4 lots of technology. I mean, there's basically there's batteries, there's green fuels, there's carbon capture, and there's digital technology and speed. That's what it's got. None of them are ready to go at the moment. And ship owners have to decide what they do. And mostly they're sitting on their hands, to be honest. So that leaves us facing a very long slog through the next 20 years in getting to the goal which IMO wants, as we sort out what the economic solutions are. And people are very coy about the economics of all these things at the moment. There isn't speculative capital there to put money into things like carbon capture, for example. So it's a voyage of discovery.
Thank you. True to say that we live in interesting times from a geopolitical and other perspectives. There's market volatility. What impact on the shipping sector and shipping industry is this having, and what do you think the future trends look like as a result?
Well, of course, this is President Trump is ringing the changes on this one. But this is, I mean, really, in the post-globalization era, what we're seeing is really China has now come of age. They created the last boom. The sort of interim phase since the 70s was the China boom, which in a way created the same sort of bubble that we had in the 70s, enormous shipbuilding, a lot of surplus capacity and so forth. Not quite as bad. And what we're looking at now is a period where I think really what I mean by deglobalization is I think the Pacific, which is now much bigger in the maritime terms than the Atlantic, it will quietly move away. The Atlantic has a different sort of culture and a different sort of economic structure. And so I think that what we're going to be looking for is a redistribution of manufacturing, which is going to take a long time. Because I mean, one of the things that I think Mr. Trump has a point about, if all of the shipbuilding is in the Pacific, it's not ideal, really. I'm not saying that we should start shipbuilding. I just mentioned that because it's in the news. It's the other feature of this change in the Pacific is that countries like the Philippines are growing quite wealthy, and the days of cheap crews, which is what shipping industry companies have relied on for the last 50 years, are coming to an end. I mean, and so I think there's going to have to be a complete rethink of the whole personnel policy of the shipping industry.
So just sticking with that rethink, I think in your literature you have referred to existing shipping business models being outdated. And maybe expand a little bit for us, Martin, if you would, on why that is and what changes you think organizations in the industry needs to be making.
Well, this is such an interesting topic. I mean, we're still really using the personnel system that the ancient Greeks were using and the Babylonians before them. Each ship is a profit center. You can read that in the Babylonian code. And the people on the ship are in control of the ship, and the master has absolute control. These sort of broad principles are still there, but they were necessary because of communications, and the communications have changed dramatically and are changing dramatically. I mean, with Inmarsat tried very hard to and made a good start in making it possible for ships to communicate with the office in real time. I think the sort of low-level satellite systems, there's a lot of competition coming into Starlink and so forth. So suddenly there is the reality that you can talk that companies can talk to their ships in real time. And the strange thing is, with today's businesses, the reason I was a bit skeptical about the business structure is that there are so few people on shore compared with on the ship. I mean, I remember being told by Sammy Offer that his rule of thumb was one person on the ship, on shore for every ship at sea. It doesn't come to, he had thousands of ships, but it doesn't come to much. And so we really do need to look at a situation where we make the most of the personnel on the ship as well as the personnel on shore. This is going to be a great change, and it's going to become increasingly possible. First of all, as supporting systems on board are there to actually make sure that if you put a 26-year-old as chief engineer, he's got a lot of support. And secondly, the fact that you can talk real time to the people in the office and rotate people more easily. So I think that's my thinking behind this whole question of the company structure creaking at the joints a bit.
Some quick-fire questions for you, Martin. First question, what do you think is the next big thing so far as the shipping industry is concerned?
Well, I think the shipping industry is pretty opportunistic. It takes what comes along. We have had an amazing few years for the containers, and I think perhaps one of the great developments in the last few years is that containers has suddenly joined bulk tankers and bulk carriers as speculative investments in the markets. To go back to your question, I think the big issue is whether, first of all, shipping companies can get digital systems to work. I mean, if you look at McKinsey, everybody's struggling with this, not just at sea, and it's much harder at sea because if you've got a fleet of 50 ships and they've all got different systems, managing the IT is going to be a nightmare, frankly. And so there's a long way to go in getting that one sorted. And secondly, the logistics. I mean, one of the things you really can do to get the carbon footprint down is manage logistics better, deliver the cargo closer to the final destination, i.e. short sea shipping, and integrate all the bits in the chain effectively. And I think this is going to create a lot of opportunities for newcomers to the business. I think this is going to open the whole thing up because it's so different.
Sticking with the changes to the business, financing of the business, do you see alternative forms of capital as replacing traditional lending in relation to ship financing?
Well, lending was, to a large extent, a product of the euro-dollar market. And the euro-dollar market is an interesting question in itself at the moment. But I would say recently we've seen the leasing companies much more active, and the Chinese unconventional finance from the leasing companies, and the private capital has been much more, private or institutional capital has been much more willing to get into shipping ventures in one way or another.
Is that a trend that you see continuing?
Well, as long as I think yes, and the main reason for that is really that these guys are not charities. They want to make a decent return, and for many years, shipping companies traded below net NAV because they didn't really make much, Recently, since COVID, we've seen a lot of money coming in, and I think, the opportunities are there for private investors. If you could, maybe shipping could get into the Silicon Valley space. It is a possibility there, and their great thing. Elon Musk wouldn't be where he is today if he hadn't had this wall of money.
So if you could give one piece of advice to someone coming into the shipping industry today for the first time, what would that be?
I would, the first thing I'd do is prepare myself. And I think that there's two things you can do. One is to make sure I got a technical understanding, both of the digital and the mechanical engineering, because recently shipping people have focused more on finance, and I think that we're going to have to deal with a lot of technical change. So I would recommend a few years learning of the business, get some practical skills on the sharp end, and then get ready to be your own John Frederiksen in the future, because I think those opportunities will always be there in shipping. And, this is an old business which needs new faces.
Professional to personal, tell us, what do you do to relax? You've got a busy life, clearly, have had a busy life. How do you relax?
Sounds strange, but I'm doing the 4th edition of my book, and it's quiet, and you settle down, and I get up early in the morning, and you settle down, and you write something, and then you look at it, and you think that's worse than it was before. So you start again. It's a fantastic, I would say, doing a 4th edition of a book is a perfect retirement hobby.
And I understand you are a keen motorcyclist. So if you could choose a bike from any era in motorcycling, what would it be?
Wow. Well, I have a friend who's got a Brough Superior, and that is the la creme de la creme, but they're very hard to get hold of. I think actually BMW's come out with a little electric bike, which looks fantastic to me. I haven't tried it yet, but this thing goes, the acceleration is wonderful. So I might be interested in one of those. The trouble is you get older, you've got to be careful.
Martin Stopford, thank you very much indeed.
Giles, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.